Hi guys, how's it going? Ivano here, and today we're going to be talking about the Immortal Juggernaut, which is of course the tanking discipline of the Juggernaut class. So a little bit about the class and its place in the current meta. If you have seen me play it live on stream already, then you will know that Juggernaut tank right now is one of the strongest specs in the game, full stop. It has the highest damage output out of all of the tank specs and can even compete with some of the DPS specs in the game. I would say that the Juggernaut tank, if you're competent at the spec, you can average around 10,000 DPS, but I have seen games with more than 15k DPS, so it's quite crazy considering that you are a tank and you can guard, of course. Another strength of the class is that it is the only discipline in the game that has 2 4-second hard stuns, which allows for some pretty nice crowd control combos. Being a tank, of course, it is quite survivable and hard to kill. However, Juggernaut is not as tanky as the PowerTech, for example, and it can get tunneled by some of the classes that are strong right now, such as Madness Sorcerer or the Pyro PT, or of course the ubiquitous Lethality Operative. Something else that I would see as a weakness of an overall really strong spec is the Juggernaut tank doesn't have the best AoE control, meaning that compared to the PowerTech tank, it is not as easy to control a large group of enemies. Juggernaut tank used to have an AoE slow, but now outside of a utility that you're probably not going to take, it doesn't have any real possibility to slow a large group of enemies and to control them that way. It doesn't have the AoE stun that PowerTech tank has. And while you can spec into Intimidating Roar, which is your 6-second soft CC, that is optional and you would rather take something else. So it's very good at controlling a single target with stuns and roots, but not so good at controlling a large group of enemies. Moving on to the key abilities. The first one, of course, would be your Soresu form, which is the tanking form that Juggernaut tank gets as a passive. Makes you more tanky, it gives you free armor, some additional damage reduction, and gives you an accuracy buff, which means that in this discipline, we will not need to take any accuracy from gear. Second important ability, this is the big one, Crushing Blow. Crushing Blow is insane. It really does crazy damage considering being a tank. Even for a DPS, this would be a crazy ability. You can hit up to 100k crits with Crushing Blow. But the real crazy thing about this ability is that it's an AoE if combined with Aegis Assault. So 100k by itself would be one of the hardest hitting abilities in the game. But having this being an AoE is absolutely crazy. And why does it hit so hard? Well, it's because of the Crushing Mark utility that you can take and you will take, which makes it so that you deal an extra 50% more damage if your targets are taunted. This is nuts, insanely overtuned, and we'll be taking this all of the time to just do tons of damage. Next key ability is Taunt. Many players don't know that, but in PvP, taunts behave a little bit differently than in PvE. And the important effect here is that if you taunt an enemy player, then this enemy will do 30% less damage to all of your teammates for 6 seconds. Of course, taunt only has a 15-second cooldown, so this is quite a high uptime, and it's the main skill that you need to learn as a tank to use your taunts effectively. The second main skill that, of course, distinguishes you as a tank is Guard. Guard used to be an ability that DPS specs had as well, but now it's exclusive to the tanking disciplines. Makes it so that whoever you apply this on, and this is of course a teammate, will take 5% less damage, but then most importantly, transfer 50% of the damage that they take to you. So you're kind of sacrificing your life to protect your teammates, as long as you have Guard on them and you stay within 15 meters of them. I want to say this, if you're playing tank and you're not using Guard, you're trolling. So make sure that you swap Guard frequently on the teammate that is being targeted at the moment. Ideally before they take the damage, not when they're already at 10%, because they can be killed through that. But yes, Guard is probably, I would say, the most impactful ability in the game. And it is the way that a good tank can really carry a team fight by making sure that the key targets, so a good DPS or a healer, are guarded before they are taking damage. Okay, legendary implants. We are going to be using the same legendary implants that we are using for the Rage spec. with the exception that we have the option to use the Nimble Master package, which gives you a nice buff to movement speed whenever you use Saber Ward. And this can be nice if you are being tunneled, if the enemies are trying to kill you and you need to run away. Nimble Master just makes it so that you are fast as fuck. Tacticals. Most Juggernaut tanks, as myself, are running Overwhelming Offense. Now, this simply gives you a damage buff that stacks each time you do damage. And it's the only real damage tactical that works on Juggernaut tank, so this is what we're going to be using mostly. If you need some more survivability, you can use Grit Teeth, which will give you a higher uptime on your Saber Ward if you get attacked. And then finally, let's not forget it's a game, we are playing it to have fun. Rancor's Tail allows for some very fun combos where you can push an enemy, leap to them, reset the cooldown of your force push with Saber Ward, and then push them again, for example of the bridge in Void Star. So something really fun, but obviously this is not in general the strongest tactical that I would recommend. Most of the time you simply want to be running with Overwhelming Offense. Now about the gear. We are going to be running a skank tank setup. What does it mean? It basically means that we're going to be using DPS gear. So if you have already played Juggernaut, for example in Rage or Vengeance, you can be using the same exact gear with the exception of the offhand, where we are going to be using a shield with DPS mods. So a shield will give you a 20% baseline absorb as well as an additional 5% shield chance. Combined with our Sorese form, this is going to give us a 20% chance to shield any incoming attacks. This is really good. But we're still going to be putting full DPS mods even in our shield. Why? Because as I already said, Sorese form, the passives from the tree, and our extra defensive cooldown that we're going to be talking about later already make us tanky enough. And furthermore, defense stats in PvP are not really doing much, to be honest. Why is that? That's because they're being bypassed by internal and elemental damage, which is very prevalent on the specs that are currently strong in the game, such as Madness, such as Lethality, and also Pyro PT. So these types of damage will bypass your defense stats because you cannot shield an internal or elemental damage attack. So instead, what do? Well, we follow the motto, the best defense is a good offense. We spec into damage, we gear for damage, and we win the game by damage instead. Again, you're going to be plenty tanky just because you have your tanking stance and you have your passives from the tree. So this is really all we need using this offhand with the shield. On the side of stats, we are going to be running 0 accuracy. As I already said, as a tank, you get a 10% buff. So that's all the accuracy you will ever need. Alacrity 2200 to get to the 1.4 GCD breakpoint, and then we dump the rest into crit. You can get as much as 5000 crit if you want to. Looking at the build, on level 23 we have a couple of options. Aegis Shield is really meh. I would rather have the extra damage, even though if it's not a lot. So I'm running with the middle option here. Level 27, I take Sweeping Slash for maximum AoE damage. Sometimes, however, you can run the Ravage route, which is the middle option. It's also playable, definitely. On level 39, however, there is only one correct option, and it is Crushing Mark. Crushing Mark, I already talked about it, gives you a 50% damage boost to Crushing Blow. If you attack a taunted target, this is insane. You're always going to run this. On level 43, War Machine is also insanely strong, because it makes it so that your Enrage, which is now called Threatening Rage for tanks, is a root break. It also makes it so that the cooldown of your Threatening Rage is reduced whenever you critically hit with a forced attack. And finally, it gives you an extra 10% defense chance after activating it, which is of course very nice, free tankiness that I was talking about. Level 51 and 64 options, we are going to be running Warmonger and Field Commander, which have a very nice synergy, because the first one gives you a lower cooldown on your leap, and the second one gives you a CC immunity after a leap, which is really nice and strong. Level 68, you do have options. I mostly run Mad Dash for the extra mobility. It's also good to run away if you're being tunneled, but you can run the other two options. In fact, on level 68, all three are viable. Reflect is good if you are being tunneled as well. It is your strongest cooldown against incoming bursts, so you can run that, for example, in arenas. And Intimidating Roar, as I already said, is your AoE fear. So it's a soft CC that breaks on damage, but it lasts for 6 seconds. So it's a very impactful ability. I would not recommend that in, let's say, a random war zone because someone will break that CC, but it can be quite strong in coordinated games where you can talk to your teammates and make sure that they don't break it in an arena, for example. Finally, level 73, Pooled Hatred is OP. It gives you a 10% buff to your damage of the next ability if you get slowed or otherwise CC'd. So this is what makes 100k crushing blows possible. It is really strong. For example, a Madness Sorcerer will fill this up with only one Force Lightning and a knockback or something. So really strong. You should always take this. Of course, if you are going to be taking a lot of damage, then you can take the reduced cooldown on Enraged Defense. But in general, as I already said, we are a skank tank. We want to maximize our damage output because that's our biggest strength as a Juggernaut tank. So we are taking Pooled Hatred. Moving on, how to actually play, how to do the opener. We are going to be charging in most of the time, which will give us the stun immunity. It will root our target and it will give us some rage, which is nice. Next, we're going to be using Ravage. This can proc our relics and also gives us stacks of overwhelming offense. Finally, Aegis Assault builds more rage and gives us an AoE buff for our crushing blow. And then we're going to do the main hard hitter in our combo, which will be Taunt to trigger the 50% damage buff, Enrage, which triggers our legendary implant, 20% crit buff. And then we're going to be hitting Crushing Blow, which is going to be buffed to be AoE by Aegis Assault, and Retaliation, which will be triggered by Crushing Blow always. So you can always hit Retaliation directly in the same global cooldown as Crushing Blow, because for the tanking discipline, Retaliation does not respect the global cooldown. Afterwards, our Force Charge has triggered Warmonger, meaning that Vicious Throw will always be available and you can use it within the 20% crit window from your implant to do maximum damage. And then afterwards, you're going to go on to your priority. If you're facing a lot of targets in an AoE situation, you always want to make sure to keep Crushing Blow on cooldown. This is one of the highest damaging abilities in the game, period, so you want to make sure you press it every time it's up. Make sure that Aegis Assault is being used before it. The cooldowns line up perfectly. Smash is another good AoE attack, and then Sweeping Slash will be your AoE filler if you're specced into it. For a single target fight, simply follow this priority, and you should be good to go. On the side of defensive cooldowns, Force Charge is a good cooldown because it allows you to get around, it makes you immune to CC, and even though we don't get the 20% damage reduce that the other Juggernaut disciplines get, it is still, in my opinion, a good defensive cooldown. You can use it to get away from stuff. Similar thing with Mad Dash. Mad Dash allows you to dodge one attack while you're dashing, so you need to time this right, but again, it can also be something that helps you run away from stuff, or even get away and then leap back into another target with Force Charge, so can be a nice combo. Saber Ward is a buff to your defense and 25% less damage taken from force and tech attacks for 12 seconds. Has a quite lengthy cooldown, but as a tank, I think this is only 2.5 minutes. So this is good, and it's a good general cooldown that you can use when it's available. Endure Pain, you want to combine this with the Med Pack because the Warzone Med Pack scales off your maximum HP, and of course Endure Pain increases your maximum HP temporarily, so a very nice combo. Invincible is your extra cooldown that you only have as a tank. It's a 40% DR, which is one of the highest DRs in the game at all. So make sure that you're using that. It is quite powerful, however, it does have a long cooldown, so you don't want to waste it. And then finally, Enraged Defense, which is your most powerful cooldown. It can almost heal you to full if you're taking damage while getting this. Make sure you don't pop it when you're at 1% because you can die through it, but the heal is incredibly powerful, so make sure you're using this to take some pressure off the healers and heal yourself. Now we're going to be demonstrating the single target opener, which, as I already said, we will be leaping in, then we'll use our Aegis Assault, followed by a Ravage to build our overwhelming offense stacks. Afterwards, we're going to be doing the main combo of Threatening Rage, Taunt, Crushing Blow, and Retaliation, follow up with a Vicious Throw. Put together, it looks something like this. And that's a lot of damage. So next we're going to demonstrate how you can interrupt any caster, for example a healer, forever as a tank. So let's say we're running into range and this guy is casting something. We will leap to him, which will interrupt his cast. Now when he casts something, we use our disruption, interrupt that again, wait for the next cast, we push him to interrupt him again, which resets our leap, which will be our next interrupt, and then this interrupt will reset disruption. Now of course we have our hard stuns, which is another 2 interrupts. And by this time our leap is back off cooldown, so we can do the combo again. Interrupt, run out of range, leap, and our interrupt is available again. This is just incredibly toxic and can really ruin a healer's life if you do it correctly. And then finally, the last combo I want to show is a single target root combo, which works as follows. We are going to be using our force charge, which is a 2-second root. So after your global cooldown expires, you can wait a little bit more than half a second to use your next ability, which will be Ravage. And because in this build we are taking the overwhelming slashes on level 27, this is another 3-second root. So we have one ability we can use here in between to do damage, after which we will use our force push, which is a 2-second control and a knockdown. So again, here we're going to be delaying our global cooldown a little bit, because after 2 seconds we can use another force charge to root them for an additional 2 seconds. After this, of course, we have our 2 hard stuns, the target will be not white barred, and we can complete the combo. In the game, it looks something like this. So that's a really strong combo to control a single target and forcing them to use something like a stun or a root breaker. Otherwise, they will be tanking this full combo and you can control someone for upwards of 10 seconds. That's it for today. If you have any questions about this guide, let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to leave a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.